Welcome to the Making Schools Work podcast, a podcast for everyone in education. This show is brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. At SREB, we believe that every school has the potential to be great. Whatever you do in the school, whatever your job may be, let's talk about things that make schools work. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Making Schools Work podcast. This is Ashley Shaw, and I'm back with another summer highlight episode. This summer, we've been looking back across our first 2 seasons and pulling together some of the strongest, most practical moments from past conversations. Today, we're turning to instructional coaching. This episode is going to work a little bit differently than some of the others in the series. Instead of pulling from a wide range of episodes, we're focusing on 3 conversations about coaching. In one, Becca Silver talks about resistance, ownership, and the mindset coaches need when change gets hard. In another, Kanisa Williams gives us a behind-the-scenes look at how DeKalb County supports academic coaches and keeps the coaching role focused on instruction. And in a third, Jason Adair and Jen Zelina let us hear what coaching actually sounds like in practice as they reflect on a real lesson and think through small changes that could deepen student learning. So we'll start where a lot of coaching conversation starts, with resistance. If you ask instructional coaches what they need help with, one answer comes up again and again: working with resistant teachers. But Becca Silver says that phrase itself can get in the way.
One thing is, I actually don't say resistant teachers. I say teachers experiencing resistance.
Okay.
Because when we call people resistant, you are a resistant teacher, right? We're not labeling.
Yeah.
And when we label people, we keep them stuck in our mind, the very place where we don't want them to stay resistant, right? And so one thing that I've talked a lot about the last few years is when we see it as an experience, instead of this is who they are, we give them a chance to shift out of it, right? And it starts with our own mindset first. And I equate it to like happiness or sadness. I'm not a happy person. And I'm also not a sad person. I experience happiness and I experience sadness. It moves through me. Resistance is the same way. Resistance moves through us. And what happens in school is we misdiagnose resistance and we think about it often as a compliance issue. We don't realize it, by the way. This is all subconscious, right? We see it as more of a compliance issue. So when we think of it as that, we start using compliance strategies. How do I get them to do it? And the misdiagnosis is that we don't want to be using compliance strategies for a human problem, right? For people grappling with their own humanity.
That one shift from resistant teacher to teacher experiencing resistance changes the question. Instead of, how do I get this person to comply, the coach can start asking, what is really going on here? And that leads directly into listening. Becca says coaches need to get curious before they decide what the teacher needs. And that starts with listening, not listening to respond, but listening to understand what is underneath the resistance.
Sometimes it can be frustrating working with someone that just won't do the thing. And sometimes our brain can go into judgment about it, like, oh, they should just do it, right? And we want to shift into curiosity. We want to ask a question and they're making a statement, right? And so the question is, what do they need? What do they need support in? Because resistance is caused by one thing, and it's unmet needs.
So if we ask them what do they need, it opens them up to a conversation, and it's not a directive coaching, it's facilitative in that, okay, what do you need in order for you to feel comfortable with this? Or whatever their unmet need is, we're meeting them there.
Asking the question might open a conversation, but not even they might know the actual answer. That's why listening is so important, as Becca says next.
Sometimes we ask the people and sometimes we ask ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because most of the time people don't know.
Interesting.
They just know they don't want to do it.
Asking the leader, coach, principal, whoever it is, who's dealing with teachers with resistance, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We want them to put themselves in the teacher's shoes.
Yeah.
Right. Like to walk a mile in their steps and ask the question, why are they experiencing resistance? Change
your language.
my thinking, change my language, Jason. Right. But to walk a mile in their shoes and really start to get introspective. Okay, what are the things they need? And maybe sometimes we do want to ask them if we know we have a teacher man, I know there's resistance here. What do you need really diagnosing that?
One thing that's really important, like how do we figure out what their unmet need is? I'll tell you the 5 needs people have that are unmet that cause resistance. But before I do that, the skill that we need to figure this out is listening.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have high quality listening. And that means we need to not listen to the voice in our head, right? Like all of those thoughts about what they're saying, we have to quiet that and we have to listen to what they're saying. Because we have to hear not only what they're saying, but most of the time, it's what's underneath what they're saying.
I like that. It's listening to learn and not listening to respond, right? Like
exactly it.
In the microteaching episode, Jason shows what that kind of listening can sound like. Jen Zelina had taught a 6th grade social studies lesson on Cleopatra. The lesson was planned, scaffolded, and aligned to clear goals. But afterwards, she knew something had not quite worked. Jason does not start by fixing the lesson. He starts by helping Jen look at what students actually did. And that keeps the conversation focused on evidence instead of judgment.
And as I was starting to release the reins and I'm walking around, I was realizing like this lesson that I was really excited about isn't going as well as I wanted to. It wasn't going poorly, but it wasn't going as well as I wanted to. I was really excited that, the ESOL kids were understanding and they were able to gather the content. I even had some of them participating and raising their hand, which was fantastic. But some kids were just finishing early. So I would go over and say, okay, how'd you do? And they were just pulling random facts and filling them in these bubbles for the top-down topic web. And then my closure, I kind of asked kids, knowing that they were at all different parts of the article and some were done and some were, I knew we were going to take it into the next day, but I wanted kids to share out so I could check for their understanding of what they had learned about Cleopatra so far. And it just, I don't know, I felt leaving, I left the lesson feeling okay about it, but not great.
You left the lesson not feeling great. And I'm curious if we were to collect their papers at this point. See, we grab all their papers, their top-down topic web was their product that they were creating. Would you say if we flip through the papers and looked through them, what would we see? Would we see all similar things or a variety of things?
A variety. I think the kids that had the scaffold, right? So who had the main ideas filled out and then they had those details with, a couple of phrases, fill in the blank. They knew exactly what they needed to do. However, what I found with them was once I released the reins, they weren't actually reading the text. They were reading the text for the answers to fill in the blank. And then the other kids who had just the categories, but the blank bubbles for the details, they were just kind of random. They didn't really fall under that specific category. So I did know, it was the first time kids were really doing this and summarizing with the content area text. And that was part of the reason I wanted to do it, right? But I just knew it could have been better.
But they've been taught the mechanics of a top-down topic web, correct?
Right.
This is their first time applying it. And so, but correct me if I'm wrong, everybody in the classroom had the main idea and rise, rain, fall of Cleopatra, right? Those were their main categories. And then they were just filling in the details.
Yep. Let me give them the categories. And then reflecting after, I thought, you know what?
Yeah. So this is my curiosity, right? And the question I asked you then, and I'm going to ask you now is what's the difference between a problem and an exercise?
Jason does not start by fixing the lesson. He starts by helping Jen look at what students actually did. And that keeps the conversation focused on evidence instead of judgment. Instructional coaching asks teachers to be vulnerable. They have to let someone into their classroom, talk honestly about practice, and sometimes admit that a lesson did not go the way they hoped. Kanisa Williams is very clear that coaching has to come from a place of support.
So what we don't want to do is we always want the work of the academic coach to come from the lens of support. Academic coaches are not assistant principals. They're not evaluative. They are only coming from the lens of support. So we ask that they approach it from the potential of the teacher and not from the deficit. So if we know that we're struggling in this particular area, we're going to make sure that our entry point is as positive and optimistic as possible so that it doesn't feel punitive. Like, I know that I was in here 25 million times working with this teacher over this period of time, and you capture a student goal and a teacher goal. You share with the teacher, hey, what do you want? When we were in your classroom the other day, 17 of the 24 students, they were either asleep or off task. We got to do something different, because I could see that you were stressed. When we came in, it was stressing you out that so many were off task. So we know that this might be an area that we need to improve. What do you see happening over this? How can I support you in that? And hopefully there will be some response that says, listen, I don't know. I'm tired. I'm just over the people in the classroom. I thought that I wanted to come to education, but this is wearing me out. So whatever you can do, let's figure out this plan. And when they're vulnerable and they're able to do that, then the coach is able to get some traction and implement a few of the strategies that might be wigging that teacher out to help them to get better.
And that kind of trust matters because, as Becca says, resistance often shows up when people are being asked to change in ways they did not choose.
I say this often. We hire critical thinkers. We don't want people that have to be given the directions and just follow it. And then we hire critical thinkers and then ask them to change in ways that they didn't choose. And sometimes that grappling with that change looks like resistance. And I like to put it up against compliance. Compliance is just tell me what to do. And engagement is like, hold on, let me think about it. Do I want to do this? Do I think it'll be useful? Do I think I can be successful? Do I trust you? So people are grappling with this change they didn't choose. And sometimes that looks like resistance.
And if coaching is going to be that kind of support, schools and districts have to protect the role. Another challenge coaches know well is role drift. They are hired to support instruction, but then the school day happens. They get pulled into parent night, bulletin boards, materials, testing, lunch duty, or whatever emergency is happening that day. Kanisa talks about how DeKalb County tries to keep the coaching role clear.
Our stance is that academic coaches spend 80% of their time on things exclusive to academic coaching, and we call those things heavy coaching actions. So at the beginning of the year, we try to make sure that everybody is clear about what that 80% looks like. And what we do is we have put all of the expectations for the work of the academic coaches in something that we call a coaching playbook. And so the coaching playbook is the coaching Bible for the work of the academic coach within our district. And everybody, the academic coach and the principal, receives a copy of this coaching playbook. Inside of the coaching playbook, there is a whole section about managing the work and what that looks like.
Later, she goes on to add a little bit more.
Yes, coaches should be observing and providing feedback. Yes. Then yes, they should be providing professional learning. But ultimately, they should be in partnership with the teacher, helping to build that teacher's capacity. And the way that they're going to do that is through co-teaching, through modeling, through observing that practice after you've modeled, after you have gone in and you are co-teaching with that teacher. Then you observe and you provide feedback. You give them an opportunity to observe you and provide feedback and provide you with feedback as the academic coach so that you both can get better. So 45% of their work should be around modeling, co-teaching, and observing.
And when coaches do get pulled into other work, Kanisa does not frame it as refusing to help. She frames it as keeping the main thing visible.
How about if we go from this angle? Let's talk about all the things that you have planned and how you plan to incorporate some of the things that the principal is asking you to do while still keeping the main thing. So having a conversation with your principal about this morning, I'm going into Miss Jenkins' classroom and I'm going to go into Mr. Thomas's classroom. Later on, I had planned on doing this observation and I planned on modeling in Mr. Thomas's classroom. I would like to continue to keep this as my focus. So I think that the important thing to do is to have some regular conversations. I see that it happens less when there is a solid relationship or rapport built with the principal, where there is constant communication about what I am doing as academic coach to support teachers. When I hear that you're actually in there doing things that are tied to instruction that could benefit the students in the building, because achievement is going to be raised as a result of what is happening. When I see that and I hear teachers talking about the work that they've had with the academic coach, when I hear that as principal, as leader, then I am more inclined to be more protective of your time, because we are having regular conversations. So the first thing that I'm going to do in order to put out the fire is to make sure that the academic coach has communicated with the principal that these are the 2 or 3 things that I'm really focused on this week, and that while I am going to be able to work on these other things that you've asked me to do, this is when I would like for you to protect my time to be able to do those things so that I can still do the work of the academic coach.
That clarity makes it possible for teachers to do the kind of work that moves teachers from compliance to ownership. In schools, we talk a lot about buy-in, but Becca Silver says buy-in is not the same thing as ownership.
Then we have buy-in, which is I, the leader, got you, the teacher, to do what I want you to do. Then there's ownership right next to it. They're next door neighbors on this continuum. And the distinction between buy-in and ownership, the distinction is ownership requires a sense of agency. Teachers need to actually have some voice and choice in the change and believe that they can make meaningful change with their students if they don't experience that. And by the way, agency is both internal, I internally believe it, and external. The environment actually allows me to make changes, to implement the way I want to implement. And part of agency is I know where I'm allowed to use my professional judgment and where I'm not. And that confusion in itself, like I believe in schools, teachers have more agency than they realize. We kind of have a permission culture a lot of times where teachers think they need permission to do things that they don't need permission for.
So that distinction between buy-in and ownership, the distinction is when a teacher feels that they have agency and believe that they can make a meaningful change. And what you said is a change with students, right? So the coach or the principal asked me to do something, set up a lesson plan or have a certain strategy. I believe I can make a meaningful change. That strategy is going to work. But do they also have to believe that they can make decisions about how they do it and what in their classroom?
They need to know where they are allowed to use their own judgment in making changes.
Clarity around what is flexible and what is non-negotiable. And being purposeful about that. You're saying you'll see greater success when teachers have more clarity.
Having ownership is the belief that by being responsible, I can change things. And the only way I can fully take responsibility is if I have some stake in this game. If I am allowed to make some kind of professional judgment in this.
For the last section, Jen had a lesson that was not bad. Students were working. They had a text. They had a graphic organizer. They had scaffolds. But the coaching conversation helped uncover a deeper question. Who was actually doing the thinking?
There are 2 competing lesson cycles in education. You mentioned earlier, gradual release. I do, we do, you do. And that is by far the prevailing lesson cycle. The other one is exploration before formalization. And that is in science, you'll see it as a 5E lesson: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and then evaluate. But we can use that strategy. And what I see here in your lesson is a mismatch between the lesson cycle and what you were looking for. And when we're exercising, like when you're teaching kids how to use a top-down topic web, the purpose of it, what it's for, that's a great time to exercise. I do, we do, you do. When you're asking students to utilize that in interesting ways, what that lesson cycle leads to is kids filling in the bubbles and not necessarily thinking. Would you say that's kind of what you saw?
Yeah, exactly. I definitely wanted that deeper understanding, those higher levels of thinking.
I ask this question in classrooms all the time, and I coach math teachers mainly. And I ask the question, who did all the math today? But I almost could change it to who did all the thinking today.
Yeah.
And I hope we're transferring the thinking to say,
yeah,
the real big idea is, can you take this article of information and break it down into 3 manageable chunks, 2 manageable chunks, 4 manageable chunks, so you can start to categorize the information you're taking in, correct?
Yep.
And so if they're seeing extra information that's not important, that's something I need to know as a teacher. And I love that with this type of lesson, hopefully we're transferring ownership to the student.
That question, who did the thinking today, is such a clear example of what coaching can do. It moves the conversation from whether the lesson looked organized to whether students did the cognitive work. So if we pull these conversations together, instructional coaching is not about fixing teachers. It is not about catching mistakes. And it's not about getting people to comply. It's about helping teachers feel supported enough to reflect honestly, think deeply, and make meaningful changes in their practice. That starts with how coaches think about resistance. It depends on listening well, building trust, protecting the coaching role, creating ownership, and grounding reflection in real classroom evidence. Thank you for joining me for this summer highlight episode of the Making Schools Work podcast. We'll be back soon with another look at some of the strongest ideas from our first 2 seasons. Until then, keep building coaching conversations that help teachers grow. One honest reflection, one strong question, and one strong instructional move at a time. Thank you for listening to this episode brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. SREB is a nonprofit dedicated to improving education from pre-K all the way to PhD and into the workforce. Visit sreb.org for resources on instructional practices, teacher data, career pathways, and more. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at SREB-School Improvement and on Twitter/X and Instagram, both at SREB Education. See you next week.